Here we are checking out a new trail, new to me anyway. Follow COVID-19 social distancing. Please leash dogs 6 feet apart at all times. And you don't have to fill out the permits anymore because of COVID-19. Still open for normal use. No more, you can't get 10 people at once. 6-foot separations. This is interesting, so that prevents you having to have contact with us. But on the same hand, the idea of why they did this was a very good idea, I think, why they did the permit system. In other words, if they are looking for someone, there could be a permit there that says the person's still out or not, who they are, something about them, the license plate number of their car. Here's the permitted activities: hunting, fishing, trapping, environmental education, hiking, horseback riding, cross country skiing, snowshoe, mountain, snowmobile, berry picking. You can't do tenting, camping, overnight fires, all terrain vehicles, night access, possession of drugs or alcohol. No cutting of defacing trees or other vegetation. You can't remove soil. You can't alter stream. You can't litter. So, those are the rules. We got a few minutes, so we're just going to check out. Probably go about 15 minutes in and 15 minutes out, just because I have a time constraint today. And we'll try to find some interesting things along the way. Kind of an easy to walk trail. You get some rocks sticking up, but it's not all, hilly and things to step over constantly. Some trails are more like just pathways in the woods, which is kind of nice too. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. Sometimes I'm looking for an easier to walk on surface, and this certainly does it. See, they get the little arrows out telling you where they are. Look at these big rocks that were moved. So I have a feeling this has been a trail for a long time, but it's only been in the last year or two that I think this officially became a trail. I might be wrong. I'm going to have to look that up, I guess. We've got all kinds of beech trees. You get fir trees. It's interesting looking around there. The fir trees are not pine, which most of them are around here. We have our wintergreen plants down here. Extremely common sight in Maine. I believe these plants too. See these plants with the 5 petals? Those may be Indian cucumbers. They have a small edible root, but the root is just so small. I don't know. You'd have to be starving and have an awful lot of them to make it worthwhile to harvest something like that. Of course, you kill the plant because it's a tuber. We have one wintergreen berry here. This is a berry that's been on the plant over winter. So it's one of last year's berries. And they taste excellent, wintergreen. Very full of flavor. I've never seen a lot of berries. I've heard from people that actually go and gather them and get like a cup of them or something, make candy with or do something else with, but frankly, I only see a few. I assume that they get eaten by other creatures before people can get at them. We're still fairly close to the road. You probably can hear the cars. I'm not sure on this. It's funny, just because I said I don't often see them around in groups, there's a number of them right here. Uh, 15 of these berries would be equivalent to one baby aspirin, an 80 milligram aspirin. The methyl salicylate aspirin type compound. Synthetic wintergreen is now produced, and that's probably what's going to be in candy, and sometimes you'll see this in topical rubs, pain rubs that you put on. It will say methyl salicylate, or sometimes it will actually say wintergreen oil. And of course we have to mention that the leaves in Canada is called tea berry, and the leaves are steeped and used as a tea. And I would think that would taste, if you like the taste of wintergreen candy, wintergreen lifesavers is how I usually encounter wintergreen. I would think the tea would taste good. Here we have some standing water over there. Kind of swampy area. Oh yeah, see, look at this. I've got some stones here to have us cross. I'm kind of keeping track of what's here for different land types. So here we have some really wet areas, as they go down, dry areas. So the whole idea to me is you're going to find woodland plants that like moisture around this area, where it's drier you may not. And some of the things that like moisture might be horsetail, jack of the pulpits, and various other plants as well. I'm also just keeping an eye, look at some of the dead fallen things, thinking, what would this area be like once the mushrooms start coming up? And in this area I could certainly look and see what type of mushrooms would be associated with a beech and certain fir trees as well, because a lot of mushrooms live in association with other plants, trees, and what they do is they take sugar from the tree, but in exchange they help the tree access more nutrients. The mycelium under the ground, the actual part of the mushroom that stays there year round, acts as kind of a wick. And if certain areas are deficient in some type of nutrients and it's over on this side, that mushroom wick will transport that over for the roots of the tree, and then exchange, it takes sugars from the tree. So it's a beneficial relationship. It's not really parasitic, because they're both symbiotic. They're both getting an advantage out of the exchange. Now, there are mushrooms that just grow on living trees and are definitely parasitic, and they can eventually kill trees. Honey mushrooms are like that. I believe Berkey polypore is also. And some of these mushrooms do what they call butt rot. In other words, they eat the tree out from the inside out. They eat the base of the tree. So eventually what will happen is the tree will just die and fall over from the effect of that fungus being inside of it, chewing it up and eating it. And of course, that if you take the lower part of a trunk of a tree and you eat most of the food value out of it, that's going to weaken the tree, and it's going to be the end of the tree. I guess in England they have a dramatic problem with honey mushrooms. Very dramatic. There's way too many of them, and they feel they are affecting the forests, impacting them negatively, rather than it being some kind of balance where, new trees are replacing as quick as the old ones go out. But that appears not to be the case as far as some of the things I've watched on TV or read about honey mushrooms in United Kingdom. Now here's a dead giveaway that this plant is in fact the Indian cucumber. It's got a second story to it. So if I was to dig up that plant, which I'm not going to do, this isn't a place where you're allowed to do it, but you'd find a small root about the size of a pencil head eraser, and it's edible. It has a very kind of fresh, clean taste. But again, I suppose if you were caught somewhere out in the forest and you had nothing to eat and there were enough of them around, hopefully you'd get more calories out of them than digging them up. They're not usually down too deep. You can see just in this one area, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 12 plants in this one patch. But again, 12 of those, that doesn't add up to much food value, the roots, and like I say, you'd be killing each one that you pull up. But again, if it was survival, that would be one thing, but it doesn't seem that much of an ethical thing to harvest. Even if it was on your own land, it's just a matter of, they're not like super abundant. They do grow in different places, but to me, you don't find them. At least I've never found them in, huge numbers. Except I guess there's a place in Scarborough where I've seen them. And again, that's in an area where you're not allowed to dig and kill plants, but again, just something to know. It's kind of interesting to know what food was out there. It kind of fascinates me. Of course, the character of the woods and the land have changed dramatically since only Native Americans were here, but those are types of things that they would have accessed and used for food routinely. And without all the development and everything, and the forest would just have a much greater yield of plants, edible plants, and of course, wildlife and game. I'm reading a book it's called Hybrids. One of the interesting facts, and I found this hard to believe, but they said that, a forager, a hunter-gatherer, caveman type person, needed about 20 square kilometers to get enough food to eat. That's how much one individual had. That's at roughly about 5,000 acres. And they were saying, well, that same land could support 6,000 farmers. And, that seems a little high to me, but, that would be less than an acre per farmer. But let's say we cut that down to half that number, and even 3,000. I mean, it's just remarkable how different and how sparse things are if you're trying to actually survive in the wild. And back then, again, I think the content of the forest as far as plants and animals was much higher. I have a number of books by Samuel Thayer, and he decided to do an experiment where a certain length of time he was going to live off the land. Now, he did give himself the permission to do anything they had canned previously they could use. But basically, I think it was he and his wife, they took 4 hours each day to gather enough to eat. So it took them that much of a day to find enough to eat. And like I say, that was including some of the things they had put away previously, in their food store. So, I mean, and that's an expert. He's written, I've got all 4 of his books, they're really good. each book has about 40 or so plants in it. He really goes into a lot of detail, which I really enjoy rather than it just being an identification guide. And so you can imagine a non-expert, it could take you 8 hours a day or even longer than that each day to be able to pull up enough requirements out of the land, the forest or wherever you happen to be, to actually have enough to eat. I would think without trapping and having some type of game, trying to live long term in the wild would be very, very difficult. A lot of these people think, they've got their, they've got some survival kit, they've got snare wire in there, all these things, and they're thinking, well, if society breaks down, I can go out in the woods and live. Wrong answer. Everybody's going to be doing that. There's going to be tons of people, so unless you're in an extremely remote area, the woods will be picked bare for anything edible. And there just wouldn't be any game left either in no time at all. It's funny, we're seeing the encroachment of certain animals. I've seen videos of Europe and Asia where some of the cities actually have animals come into it that would never come into it before. Well, Gorham has a bear now that's showing up in people's backyards. They're mainly the bear seems to be going after feeders. But then Portland, in the Rivington area, also now has a bear. And I think this is I don't think it's because of a lack of food. I think it's because the lack of human activity, that buffer zone between their wild area and us has shrunk, and they feel free to come into areas now because there aren't all these people on the roads. There aren't all these people in the backyards doing things, moving around. So they feel much safer coming in such close approximation to man. And once the social distancing and everything is over, I'm sure they'll all go back to their areas. They'll retreat, and things will go back to more or less normal for them. Foxes too. People have been seeing more foxes, but foxes are a little different. They're pretty crafty, and they've been known to. They're not really afraid of people as much as some other animals. So it might be actually common that, and I've seen videos of this, that's why I say this, is a fox taking up residence under someone's porch. Because, man supplies some food in the areas, and they can deal with people being on the porch during certain times of the day, and so they've actually had to take foxes, clear them out from under people's porches or near their cellars or whatever, because they don't have as much of a fear of man as, say, some other animals do. Well, so I think I've got a little look at this anyway, and we'll come back and follow along and do a much bigger walk later.